Hello again. Brett Premack, Jazz Video Guy Live, Monday, June 1st, 2020. I don't know about you, but when I wake up in the morning, I'm like, what day is it? These times are so confusing, so difficult. But anyway, thankfully, we have the music to keep us sane. And today, my special guest will be Steve Wilson. So before we get started, a little bit about Steve, a little of Steve's playing, and then we'll talk to Steve live.
Steve Wilson is one of the most versatile saxophonists that we have today. He's a saxophonist who seems to be welcome on whatever bandstand, has the good sense to have him on board. From small ensembles to large ensembles, he seems to be particularly in demand for large ensemble work, and that suggests his versatility and his selflessness and what he brings to the table. I've always been a great admirer of Steve Wilson. Yeah, he's a musician of great integrity, I find.
Wow, 7 years.
Oh yeah, that's a few years ago, Steve.
I still had hair.
So did I.
Right.
What is that like? The say again?
Well, no, I think that was 1988.
Yeah, that was the Fuji Jazz Festival,
Right.
and there used to be a lot of American musicians who went to Japan and played over there during that time.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that was my second time at Mount Fuji. My first year was in '87, and and then we recorded. That band actually had just recorded for Toshiba EMI, which was distributing Blue Note, the relaunched Blue Note label, and then we did the '88 Mount Fuji Festival.
Yeah, and those were like pickup bands, right? They put a bunch of great people together, and you made music, or they weren't really working ensembles. Am I right?
Well, it was a mix. Actually, that group that was Ralph's first quintet, and we did two recordings with that same personnel with that quintet. Um, so it was technically a working band for I don't know, I guess about a year, maybe a year and a half. And then of course Terrence was launching his own solo career at that point, as was Jerry Allen. Then the personnel changed after the second record, but it was a great group. It was a very dynamic group, as you can hear.
Yeah. So it was Terrence Blanchard on trumpet, Steve Wilson on alto, Jerry Allen on piano, Phil Bowler on bass, and Ralph Peterson on drums. Ralph is going to be my guest on Wednesday. What do you when you first heard Ralph? What did you hear in his playing that made you want to play with him?
Well, I have to tell you, Ralph. I met Ralph when I joined the group OTB in 1986, and Kenny Garrett had left the band to join Art Blakey, and I was about to move to New York from Virginia, and I joined the band, and Ralph was the drummer, and that was one of the most important musical events and musical relationships that had happened to me, because playing with Ralph completely changed my playing, and he was one of the most incredible drummers I'd ever played with, but one of the most incredible musicians. And I really learned how to hear all of the music, all of the layers of what was going on through playing with Ralph, because he heard everything all of the time. I should say he hears, as in present tense. He hears everything all of the time. He hears where it's going. He hears it like a score, as if you were listening to a symphony. He could hear every part all the time, and he's a great composer. Of course, he plays great trumpet, great piano. So I really have learned a lot from playing with Ralph, and of course we have a deep friendship also. So he's just an incredible, gifted musician.
He is. We have a comment here from Aaron Bernstein. Hey, Steve's greeting from a newly minted graduate. One of your students?
Yes, CCNY, great violinist.
Yeah. Steve has been teaching at CCNY since what is about 7 years now?
Yes.
What is the experience of teaching this music like? You are a guy who, I don't think you started out as a teacher, you started out as a performer with a very distinguished resume of people you played with. Then you got into teaching. How did you find teaching to be in terms of sharing what you learned?
I love it. I really love it, man. And you're right. I came into teaching, actually, first came into teaching in the early 90s. Was teaching saxophone at William Patterson, thanks to Rufus Reed, who was running the program at that time and invited me to try it. And it just kept evolving. And since I've been at City College as of 7 years ago, expanding my teaching capacity and responsibilities has been a beautiful experience, mainly because of students like Aaron, who have a great intellect, a great curiosity about the music, a great dedication, along with being very talented. And very dedicated, and they keep me on my toes, man. They bring information and um, just different ideas to the music when they're improvising and arranging, composing. So, and I love sharing the information that I've been able to get through playing with great masters. I think that's really the most important aspect of teaching is the oral tradition.
Yeah, I think that passing on the tradition is something that's really empowered this music. Because when I was a young man, I'm not so young anymore, there were working bands like Cannonball Adderley and Horace Silver and Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers. And if you had your stuff together, if you had your shit together, you ended up in one of those bands and you learned. It was like a university, uh, all that you could learn from Horace Silver or Cannonball, and also working almost on a daily basis. Now the situation has changed dramatically. We've got, excuse me, jazz education programs. Now you
Hmm.
came up in a situation where you worked with mentors. Excuse me. Now the roles are reversed. Do you like being a mentor?
I love it. I embrace it. One, because I learn a lot. I learn a lot about, uh, I learn even more about the experiences that I've had. I have to articulate that experience and to get beneath the surface. And of course, I have to do some research because of new information that I'm trying to find out even more about, So it's really enriched my experience as well as the students.
Excuse me. Jimmy Heath once told me, teaching is learning.
It absolutely is. Absolutely is all the time. Yeah.
I want to go and play a more contemporary track by a video by Steve, not from the previous century, but from this decade.
Okay.
Yeah, that was Buster Williams group. Buster Williams on bass with Steve on alto, George Colligan on piano, and the infamous Lenny White on drums. Lenny White played on Bitches Brew. I mean, this guy's been around for a long time. We've got a question from Steve Rickenbacker. He mentioned that he really likes the way George Colligan plays. Is George Colligan living in New York now?
No, George is living in Portland. He's been in Portland now for about 5 years, I think. He's teaching at Portland State University.
All right. The man knows his way around the keyboard, that's for sure. Another question from Steve Rickenbacker. He wants like to get your thoughts on your experience working with the Bill Bruford, Tim Garland, Earthworks Underground Jazz Orchestra or Underground.
Yeah,
Orchestra. What is that?
yeah. Well, that was a live recording that was done in New York at the Iridium. Oh my God, that must have been what, 15 years ago? So many years have gone by, but Tim Garland and I worked together with Chick Corea and Origin. And for those of you who don't know Tim, he's one of the most brilliant musicians on the planet, a great tenor saxophonist and bass clarinetist, flautist, but also an amazing composer and arranger. And he's been working with Bill Bruford for many years. And I think he did most, if not all, of the arrangements for that project. It was not a big band, but I think was about a 10-piece band or something like that, with brilliant horn arrangements. And we did a week at the Iridium here in New York and did a live recording, and it came out really fantastic.
Steve, you've worked in so many different situations. I mean, Chick Corea, Dave Holland, Christian McBride, Maria Schneider, large ensembles, small ensembles. What do you prefer?
All of it, man. Really, I love all of it. They all have their own unique set of challenges, all unique set of inspirations. Um, um, each one is a musical universe in its own, and I love all of it. It's all great.
Yeah, it really is. I want to jump over here to something rare that we'll talk about in a second here. I apologize for not having it queued up exactly, but this is something from 1970.
Mm.
And I'm not going to tell you anything about it. I'm just going to play it for you. We'll talk about it. That was, of course, Alice Coltrane. This was a short documentary that was shown on the show Black Journal. Tony Brown, a African-American journalist, hosted the show. And that was an excerpt from a 15-minute documentary about Alice. And when I just saw that recently for the first time, and I was there in 1970. I'm a little bit older than Steve. I was going to NYU Film School at the time, and last clip we looked at Lenny White, and I mentioned he was on Bitches Brew. That whole fusion thing with Miles and Weather Report and Chick and Herbie, that was starting back then, and we
Hmm.
still had John Coltrane had been gone for 3 years, but his music, his aura, his energy, his spirit was still very much with us. And there was a lot of for lack of a better expression, avant-garde, out music that was being played then. The loft started to happen with Sam Rivers' great loft downtown at Studio Rivby, and Rashid Ali had a loft on Green Street. And then I would say into the 70s and 80s, that music, that avant-garde music seemed to, fewer people are playing it. Now it's practically non-existent. Why do you think that faded, Steve? Any thoughts on that?
That's a great question, man. I mean, it's around. It's still around. Not it's not as, I guess, prominent as it once was. But but I think it speaks to that particular period. We're talking about 1970s, and that late 60s, well, actually mid 60s and 70s was such a transitional time. And I mean, you lived through it. I was only a kid when that was going going on. But when I think about what was happening in the culture as a whole, it was a time of Afrocentricity. So there was an awakening of African roots, Pan African roots. Also, there was music was not as compartmentalized as it became in the 80s. So I think musicians across genres and styles were much more open to each other, and so were audiences. Because in radio, and radio had a lot to do with that because radio wasn't so compartmentalized, as you know. Um, but when it became very corporatized in the 80s, they separated everybody and everything. So I just think it was a great period in American history and American culture, another sort of great awakening period that we were going through. And everyone was searching for the spirituality also in where they were in the scheme of things. So I think that music speaks a lot to that. And of course, the civil rights struggle. Um, so it was so many different things. And of course, what we're going through now, who knows what this is going to give seed to. Maybe there'll be another great awakening musically that'll happen because of the events we're dealing with now. So, um, but certainly it's a very dynamic music. And I think Coltrane left us such an amazing legacy that we're still drawing from that. And it's going to be the fuel of music to come.
Now, one of our viewers, Open Song, says the music from the 60s and 70s was influenced by cultural and political situation. How do you feel, Steve, about today's problems, how they might affect jazz?
Well, I think it is affecting it now. I mean, look at what we're going through. Um, I mean, for all intents and purposes, all the live music has been shut down until further notice. In terms of musicians and an audience together in the same room. Um, so who knows what this is going to lead to creatively? I'm sure it's going to lead to some very um, interesting music, some new ideas and concepts because these times of great challenge are always opportunities to seek new avenues of creativity. So we'll see what happens.
Well, sadly, we are in a very difficult period. I don't want to get too political here, but
Right.
I mean, I live in Tucson, Arizona. Last night, the state of Arizona announced that we were on a curfew from 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. This is, for me, the first step to martial law. And that, I'd hate to move in that direction. But if we go back and if we go back in history, it's times of repression have produced some of the greatest art. And
That's right.
the thing I'm missing at this point is live music. I, for
Yes.
one, get so much from live music, from hearing musicians play a few feet away from me, and we've kind of been robbed of that lately. And I'm
Hmm.
concerned because of the economics that we're going to lose some clubs. I mean, the Vanguard is in jeopardy. Who knows how long we're going to be before we go back to the Village Vanguard. Uh, in New York City, you got these landlords. They don't care whether you're open or not. They just want the rent.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
a very difficult situation. So I can't predict what's going to happen. What do you think about this increase in the number of musicians who are doing performances now, streaming performances online? I look to your former collaborator, Chick Corea,
Hmm.
who has done these incredible live streams almost every day in his studio. He just plays for an hour. Do you
Right.
think that will kind of keep our existing base of listeners and maybe find some new ones as well?
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. I think it will definitely create new listeners. That I can already attest to because I actually have some friends who have reached out to me and they'll say, "Hey, man, I went online and I saw this musician. You ever heard of this guy? Wow, I've never heard of him. He's fantastic. He's great." So, or they'll go online and see Chick and say, "Man, I've always liked Chick's music, but I've never really checked him out like what he's doing now and just watch him play piano, man, he's even more amazing than I knew. So, yeah, I think it will keep the music going. I think it will create new fans. I mean, yes, it's going to be very challenged. This is going to take a long time for us to get back to normalcy, or some sense of normalcy. But I do believe that the music is very powerful, and we have too many artists that are dedicated, not just from a creative level, but on a humanitarian level, because we understand the power of this music and how it can impact society.
Yeah, I mean, it has universal impact. People all over the world listen to jazz and they want to play it. And I mean, this year's a little weird, but every year there's a lot of musicians who move to New York. They want to be part of it, and very challenging to make a living and to be part of it, where people just love it so much. I mean, there's a lot of tenor sax players in New York, that's for sure.
Right, that's for sure. And a
Yeah.
lot of great ones.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about, and the thought just zapped out of my mind. So while I get my mind back together, let's go to another a track from that Buster Williams you did, that Buster Williams gig you did at Jazz at Lincoln Center.
Hmm.
go. Sorry about that. Layman's question, is it difficult to switch from the soprano to the alto? The armature is a little bit different. Because you're a versatile guy. You're going flute, soprano, alto, God knows what else. How does that affect your chops?
No, I mean, it's pretty easy for me. I mean, I just have to be conscious of pacing myself to a gig, especially when the music is really intense. But, you know, when you have like a 3 or 4 or 5 night engagement, it gets easier as the days go by because your chops are getting used to that. So you're building up that endurance. But in general, I try to be conscious of not, blowing them out. But other than that, I've been doing it for so long, it's a pretty effortless switch.
Steve, you've done a number of recordings with other people and you've done your own recordings. For people who are new to your music, people who are visiting this chat today, which of your own recordings would you recommend?
Oh, wow. Well, just so you know, I'm self-critical uh, of myself, of my own playing on everything. But oh boy, that's hard to say because they all have something that I like, mainly because of the musicians that I have playing with me. Well, let's see. I'd say 4/4 time, which is FORFOR. I'm sorry, FOUR time, which is a recording I did in 1992, I think. 92 and 93. And that was with Leon Parker on drums, Larry Grenadier on bass, and Bruce Barth on piano. Um, that record was a lot of fun to do. We had worked at Bradley's, which was a club in New York. We worked in Bradley's for a week, and we went in the studio, I think on a Sunday, no, on a Monday, and we did recording in about 4.5 hours. Just kind of played itself down. So that was on Crisscross label. Um, but every record that I've done has been different from the other. Um, and I explore different areas. That's just kind of where I'm at.
What's your most recent recording, Steve?
Uh, Under my own name, the most recent one was done live at the Village Vanguard about 4 years ago now. And it was a self-produced recording. And that was with the band I have called Wilsonian's Grain with Bill Stewart and Orrin Evans and Ugonna Okegwo. We recorded for 2 nights there um, out of the week engagement that we had. And I had a lot of fun doing it.
Now, you mentioned being self-critical about hearing your own playing. I used to do a lot of work with Sonny Rollins, and he is the king of being self-critical. In fact,
Oh, man.
going into a recording studio with him is a painful experience.
Oh, man.
He rarely likes what he plays, and he never goes back and listens to his old music. Do you ever go back to your old recordings and say, gee, I wish I did that differently, or that sounds good, anything like that?
Yeah, well, as hard as I find it to believe Sonny saying that about himself, because of course we all, think he's a genius, and he is. But I can certainly relate to it. I think where most of us are our own worst critics, self-critics anyway. And I honestly, I have a hard time listening to myself on a lot of my recordings. Um, as a matter of fact, when you dialed up that first thing with Ralph Peterson and Mount Fuji, I haven't heard that in probably maybe 20 years or more. And and I think about where I was then as a player, and I'm like, man, I was just a baby. And I'm playing with these great, musicians who were my age, but much more advanced than I was at that time. But so I understand that. But from time to time, I can go back and listen to some things and go, oh, okay, well, that's a little better than I thought. Not quite as painful as I thought.
Yeah, I see the whole thing as a process. In
It
fact,
is.
Gary Bartz once said to me, Gary, who, for my money, one of our greatest musicians, greatest improvisers.
I agree.
He said to me when I saw him at a gig, I think it was what's that club on Broadway and 104th Street? Is that Smoke?
Oh, Smoke, yeah.
Smoke. Incredible set. He came off the bandstand. I was blown away. He said, listen, I would like to have I need another lifetime just to work on this music.
Yeah,
I said,
I agree with that.
well, man, you're a master. He said, no. So actually, the learning never stops with this music, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with Bart about myself. I feel the same way. I mean, because Bart is one of my main inspirations. I call him the griot because, when he plays, you can hear the whole history of the music in his playing. And he's telling stories all the time. It's just it keeps you so enthralled. But and Gary, of course, covers a wide musical terrain. So he's inspired me in that way. But I feel the same way, man. I feel like I hope I get another 3 or 4 lifetimes because there's so much music to get to in terms of just learning about or listening to or getting deep inside of it that I know I won't get to in this lifetime. But and another way, that's the beauty of it. It keeps us humble, it keeps us growing, it keeps us open, and it keeps us trying.
I mentioned Sonny Rollins. Sonny and Michael Brecker are two musicians that I know. Michael, of course, is no longer with us. When they were, they practiced all the time. I mean, all the time. And I once said
Yeah.
to Michael, I said, Michael, you're a master. Why are you still practicing? Why are you still practicing? He said to me, because I need to be there when it comes through.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to record with Michael. It's a record he did called Wide Angles, and it was an ensemble, with 3 woodwinds, 3 brass, and a string quartet and a rhythm section. And I think we did 2.5 days of recording, something like that. And the same thing with Sonny. Michael, would take after take after take. He would get stronger as the day went on. Most of us we hit a peak of it around 5 or 6 hours when we start to go downhill. But Michael would go up. I mean, even into that 6 hour, man, he was going into that next gear. And it was so funny because after every take, he would come out of the booth just shaking his head, going, "Oh man, geez, I was terrible." And we would all look at each other in just amazement because with every take, he was so amazing, and he played something different every take. And but that's how humble he was. He was always reaching and trying to find, you know, I won't call it perfection, but to find that sweet spot, that he was looking for.
Yeah. So when you practice now, Steve, what do you practice?
Well, my practice is geared and has been geared around usually the work that I have coming up. Of course, now I'm in a different zone that we don't have any work coming up, but because of my teaching duties, my daily practice time has been limited. So normally I would have several different projects coming up. I'm playing with someone's band, and I'm having to learn new music, um, or get out my doubles, my flute or clarinet. So my practicing is usually structured around that and learning that music along with just some of the basic things that I would normally practice. But being that we're in a different zone now, I'll probably get back to just some of the more basic things that I miss doing, like the scales and long tones. And I know that sounds mundane and boring, but those are the things that keep us with a good foundation. It's just like think about the basketball players, um, who are most of them are millionaires and have trouble making foul shots. So I don't want to have any trouble making foul shots when I go to a gig. So
Yeah,
that's what I kind of equate to.
that's a great analogy. One of our viewers, Mike Bassey, I saw Chico Hamilton at Ronnie Scott's in 1987, Reggie Washman on bass guitar. Was it Steve on sax? Did you make that gig? Did you play with Chico?
No, that may have been Eric Person.
Yeah.
It was another Eric's a fantastic altoist and soprano player. That I know he worked with Chico, so that may have been Eric.
Yeah. And Steve Rickenbacker has a comment. He's always loved your playing. He says that Steve is the reason why he believes Origin is the best Chick Corea band of the past 25 years.
Wow.
Steve, could you say a few things about playing with Chick?
Well, it's been one of the most fantastic experiences I've had as a musician. He's always putting together great bands. He's just nonstop on the creative in the creative zone. He's constantly creating, and he's always thinking in the moment, like he's got his footprint like in the now, in the second. Um, and from night to night, man, he never repeats himself. He's always looking ahead, and he has a way, even from the piano, that pushes you beyond your comfort zone. He's trying to get you to stretch and to play what you don't know and to find new stuff in the probe every time you play. And even when he has specific concepts about what he's about a tune or composition or what he's looking for, once you find it, he's going to push you to go beyond it. And he's just a joy to work with and a joy to play with. Become great friends. He's a mentor, and and you just never know what he's going to do, man. He's always got new ideas. He's always got a gazillion projects. He knows so much music. He knows a lot about music, and he's very sharing. He's always giving of his time, and he loves to share information, and he's just a joy.
Yeah, I think his daily broadcasts are a good example of that. You don't find many artists, especially artists of his caliber, going online every day and playing because he wants to make a contribution to people's sanity. That really impressed me, the fact that he did that.
Well, I think what he's doing is such a beautiful thing on many levels. But of course, those of us who know Chick and have worked with him over, the last 50 years or so, we know this is who he is. I mean, Chick is not going to sit around and get rusty. Um, and I think I forget, he turns, 78 this year. Um, but this is who he is, man. So people are getting a window and they're seeing, for those of you who didn't know him, he's always playing, always creating, always practicing. When he's home from touring, he's just always at it, man. So this is his natural flow.
Well, I got to share 3 memories of Chick Corea back from the old days because I'm an old school guy. The first time I saw him was with Miles and Wayne Shorter at the Fillmore East. They were on a
Wow.
double bill with Neil Young and Steve Miller. And of course, it totally blew me away. And then I guess maybe a year and a half later, it was the infamous Miles at Fillmore gig, which they recorded all 4 nights. And I knew Chick was in the band, and they came out on stage, and on one side of the stage, Chick Corea on electric piano. On the other side, Keith Jarrett on Farfisa electric organ.
Right, yeah.
Now that night, that concert was a double bill with a wonderful singer-songwriter who's no longer with us named Laura Nero. Miles came on first. After Miles played, I had to leave. I mean, what could top that? Cut to, I guess, about a year later, Chick had left Miles to form a new band called Circle with Anthony Braxton and Dave Holland and Barry Altschul. And one night, Miles' then current band, which was Gary Bartz, Michael Henderson, and Keith and Ayrto, played down at the Village, played at the Cafe A Go-Go. And they were doing, I hate to categorize it with one term, fusion music, electric music, although they played on the outside as well. You could go back and hear recordings of them. That same night, I went to the Vanguard, which was the debut of Circle.
Wow.
Now, Anthony Braxton is a avant-garde player. I mean, I I'll share this. The statute of limitations has run out. I was on a very powerful hallucinogen that night
Okay.
called LSD.
Okay.
So from the Cafe Go-Go, where Richard Pryor opened for Miles.
Wow.
First time I saw Richard Pryor, that was my bug. Like, went to the Vanguard to hear this really out music. I'll never forget, Anthony Braxton was just all over the place. An elderly woman. Now, the Vanguard, for people who don't know, is a basement club. And in between songs, an elderly woman walked down the stairs, and she came up to the front desk there, and I forget who was on the door, and she said, "Is this music very avant-garde?" All of a sudden, Braxton picked up his horn and blah, blah, blah. She turned around and walked right up the stairs. Unbelievable. And then the final piece of the story, I guess about a year and a half later, Chick formed Return to Forever. Now, the first incarnation of that was Joe Farrell on tenor, Stanley Clark on bass, Airto on drums, and Chick is into Scientology. They played a gig at the old Scientology Center on 32nd Street, New York, and that was a fantastic band. I mean, all of Chick's bands have been interesting.
Right.
But,
right.
My love and admiration for Chick, is not ending. I mean, he's been all over the music, and he's a really remarkable person. And so
Absolutely.
people go out and listen to Chick Corea, because you'll find everything from avant-garde to Chick and Gary Burton to Return to Forever to Origin to the trio with Patitucci and Dave Weckl.
Yeah.
And the music he's doing now. So
Brett, just to riff a little bit on everything you just said, which is fantastic, by the way. And this has come up in some of my discussions with some other musicians. I mean, to my knowledge, and maybe but to my knowledge, in terms of just sheer body of work, we're talking about recordings as a leader, number of compositions, number of ensembles. Other than Duke Ellington, maybe I think Chick might be the most prolific in that, statistically speaking, just in terms of body of work. So that's maybe some cause for research from someone. But it's been a remarkable career that he's had, and he's still going. He hasn't slowed down. And the second thing, just all of that music you described, where you got to go to the Fillmore and to see Miles and Laura Nyro on the same bill, or the other group you talked about, that's again speaks to that period, because where would you see that now? Because now you have what we would think of as two different audiences coming together to experience some music that's not necessarily in the same genre, at least on a commercial level, but it's just music. So again, it speaks to the incredible time culturally of where we were, that you could do that.
Yeah, Michael Kaskuna, who has produced many great jazz recordings, at that point, he was a disc jockey on WABC FM. And the radio stations were not so confined to a certain genre. So
right.
On Kaskuna's show, you would hear Coltrane, you would hear the Mothers of Invention, you'd hear Gene Ammons, you'd hear the Grateful Dead. I mean, it was just a whole time. It didn't last very long, but I feel very lucky that I was, there and could check that out.
Absolutely.
Well, Steve, we've burned through an hour here very quickly. I want to thank you for joining us today. And I would suggest to everyone, go out and listen to Steve's music. There's more videos on YouTube. I'm sure you can find them on iTunes and Spotify and every place else. So before we leave, any final words, Steve?
Well, first of all, Brett, thank you, man. It's, we've been friends for many years now, and you're such an important component to our community for what you present, and being an archivist, and you really play an important role, man. So thank you for what you're doing, and under these circumstances for again keeping the music going, bringing the musicians to the people, to each other, and tightening the bonds in our community, man. So, and that's global. That's global, man. So thank you for everything you're doing. You're really appreciated.
All right, Steve. I'll send you the check a little later today. Uh, let's see. We're going to go back to that Mont Fuji Jazz Festival again. I think a couple other people are on the gig this time. Billy Pierce is on tenor. They're going to play a Gigi Grice composition, Minority. Please come back on Wednesday for Ralph Peterson.
Will do. Yeah, I'll be there.
What happened to my Ralph Peterson here? Uh-oh, hold on one second, folks. My apologies. I'll get it. Here we go.
Ralph Peterson, Bill Pierce, Steve Wilson, Philip Harper, Michelle Petrucciani, Curtis Lundy on bass, Lewis Nash on drums.